Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming. We got kind of a small group here. We had a bigger group this morning. I've got quite a few talks, and notice it says Smart Patient Talk. That's you guys. Okay. So I wasn't just going to go patient talk. I just wanted to let you guys know the reason you're here is, and that's the way it runs in our office, is that the moms come in and they're the ones that know stuff. Sometimes the dads, like Brett, come in and they know stuff too. Anyway, so this is kind of a small group, so we'll just keep it going. What I want to do is, we've had a lot of informational talks on vitamins, minerals, biological dentistry, biological medicine, and I wanted to kind of add the anti-aging concept into the whole equation. So I'm going to turn this in a little bit. I don't want to spill that. So are you filming this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just got on the screen. Is this your water?
Yeah. So
oh, okay.
Let's move that out of the way.
It's okay. I'll put it there for you.
Okay. Open to file. Okay. So I want to give credit where credit is due, and my belief is that the Almighty God created an amazing, marvelous machine, and the proof of that is DNA. And so if you look on this is basically kind of a cheap shot for me to get my granddaughter up on the screen, because she's so darn cute, and I'm not biased, of course. So on the one side we have the man-made building blueprint, which is a series of drawings, sheetrock, mud, paint, wood, metal, steel, whatever, and it falls to the ground after a couple hundred years. On the other side, we have a DNA living blueprint that's a bioenergetic template and a biochemical template. It goes through growth phases. Each cell is anabolic or catabolic. Anabolic means it grows, and catabolic means it begins a series of declining events that are triggered by a process called apoptosis or cellular senescence. It thinks and reasons, it repairs and heals, it has strength, it matures in 21 years, and then it stops growing and begins this process called cellular senescence. And that's pre-programmed cell death. And or it's also called apoptosis. So that's that. I wanted to go back here and tell you a little bit about me. So my journey started back, I've been doing this for a little over 30 years, biological dentistry. But I didn't start that way. I started as a traditional dentist. So I did all the mercury stuff, I did all the root canals, because that's what I was trained to do. And basically we do what we're trained to do in medicine, whether we're doctors or chiros or naturopaths or MDs. We just, what we're trained to do, and we believe it, and we're boarded, and we have rules that we have to go by. But what frustrated me the most was that I felt like I wasn't helping people. I felt like, I'm going to put a silver filling in this person's mouth, but yet they've got all these other disease states. They've got all of these other symptoms. And it frustrated the heck out of me. And I really got burned out. I really got tired of dentistry. And I just thought, and we call it the drill, fill, and bill syndrome, whereby you're just drilling teeth to make money. It just made no sense to me. So I kind of lost interest. And then I decided to kind of revive myself, and so I entered naturopathy school. It took me 3 years to go through that, and I kind of got recharged and rekindled to become, because that kind of added the medical component in, even though it wasn't an MD degree, it was an ND degree. And then I had a very good friend who was a hygienist, and she said, Tom, with what you're doing, what you should do is you should go to this A4M conference and get boarded by them. I go, what's the A4M? She goes, it's the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. She goes, it's a really elite group, and they'll blow you away. And I'm like, well, let's go. She says, me and my mom and you and Jan, we can all get together, we can all go down to, it was in Las Vegas. So we did that, and I was blown away. I mean, I was absolutely blown away with the knowledge and the caliber of medicine. And this was a medical conference, but there were surgeons there were gastroenterologists, cardiologists, and one of the mentors came in and he says, so how many of you people still believe in a cholesterol myth? And I'm like, what? What's he talking about? What do you mean? Cholesterol's bad? He goes, yeah, cholesterol is, there's nothing wrong with cholesterol. It's at the scene of the crime and it's not guilty. What it is, it's a bunch of other things that trigger oxidation and free radical oxidative stress in the arterial wall, and that's what, so it's inflammation basically that causes heart attacks. So anyway, I was exposed to things like that would really kind of, I began to question what I was taught. And so I went through their protocols and I went through their boarding program, and just, so what, I say that to say this, is that I look at everything through an anti-aging, naturopathic, biological dental lens, which really kind of puts me a little bit out of the box. I still think it's the right way to go, because another mentor of mine said, he says to this group of about 3,000 physicians, he goes, when we're right, and we know we're right, even though we're going to come up against the boards, we just keep on going. And I believe it. And I think that's what's happening here, and I think that's what's happening in Nashville. And it's pretty exciting. Because when I first moved down here, I'd tell people I'm a biological dentist, or I do holistic dentistry. They go, what does that mean? What is that? Nobody even really knew what it was. And now Nashville's become a mecca. My definition of holistic dentistry in functional medicine, the holistic dentistry part is we end up with the people with the holistic problems. And we end up with a lot of the train wrecks. I mean, people are really sick out there, and they don't know why. And that's why they come to see us. So we put together clinical teams. We put together a naturopath, a medical functional doctor, a nurse practitioner, a dentist, and probably a homeopath, and teams that can really solve people's issues. So we'll talk more about that. So one of my mentors, I went to a seminar and he said, okay, here's your job, you guys. The first thing you have to do, and I'll say this to all of you too, because it's the first thing you have to do. You have to identify the biological systems that are broken. And by the way, we're going to make all this available online. I'm not sure exactly how. I mean, you can take pictures when you're on, because some of these slides they're kind of small. The print is kind of small, so you might want to shoot photos. And a lot of them have a lot of information, which I'm not going to be able to cover it all. But we'll try to make that information available. So anyway, so Frank Schellenberger, I'm out in Nevada, and he says, these people that are coming to see you are really sick, and they've got a bunch of broken biological systems. Your job as physicians, as doctors, as dentists, as naturopaths, is to identify the biological systems that are broken and then fix them all at the same time. Otherwise, they don't get well. And I'm thinking, okay, that makes some sense. So then he said, the next thing you have to do is you have to identify the biological stressors and fix those. Otherwise, they revert back, which also made a lot of sense. So I'm leaving there thinking, okay, there's a lot of pressure on us to get this right. And with people, and with the internet and people's knowledge base, people are very confused about what they're being told by their medical practitioners, and there's just so much information out there. And of course, mainstream medicine kind of tends to think anything that's holistic or naturopathic or natural doesn't have anything to do with your health, which is stupid. I mean, let's just be honest. It's just downright dumb. So, what are the stressors? Well, how about medications? So, Dupixent, Toujeo, Jardiance. You ever seen these commercials on nighttime television? You know, where the guy's mowing the lawn and he's a happy guy because he's taking Toujeo. And it's just ridiculous. I go, first of all, where do they name these? How do they name these drugs? But they're always, they're always covered. And then they give you a whole litany of things that go wrong, So if your bladder explodes and your head caves in, and you call your doctor. Well, what's your doctor going to do? He's going to put you on another drug, right? So anyway, the stressors are from 1 to 17: aging, your birthday, plastic fats, stress and anxiety leading to pain, obesity, toxicity, disrupted oral microbiota. We'll talk about that a little bit. Disrupted gut microbiota. We all know that we all at least believe now that the gut is beholden to your health, right? That's where disease starts, is in the gut. So if disease starts in the gut, where does your gut start? In your mouth. So now they've mapped, and everybody knows that they've mapped they've mapped the gut microbiome, but now we've mapped out the oral microbiome and the throat and the nasal microbiome. So we're coming up with some products that are going to really be, we think, going to be head turners. So anyway, all of these things here, here's a big one. The one in the middle, see that coming around here? This one right here. Psychoneuroimmunology. You know what that is? What you think affects your neurotransmitters. So if you have really awful thoughts and you're a negative thinker, and you have all this perceived stress, it produces neurochemicals in your gut and in your brain that are bad. And in the reverse, if you're a happy-go-lucky person and you're always looking at the bright side of things and the glass is always half full, then you have a lot better time producing neurotransmitters that are helpful to you. So all of these other things, mitochondrial, one of the things we're going to talk about is mitochondrial energy deficits and overexercise. There's a downside to overexercising. You have to know about that. Decreased cell membrane frequency and dental infections and scars. How about this one? That's correct, doctor. He claims that the instructions say to squeeze toothpaste from the bottom. This is a birthday card a hygienist sent me. Not Veronica. So it's happy birthday. Okay. So they cannot diagnose what they do not understand. Didn't you agree with that? And people hate the truth, but the truth doesn't care. The truth is always going to win. So open your heart and mind, because living life as sheep is a fantastic way to get slaughtered, which I think is kind of what we're doing. Hosea 4:6, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, but not this group, not you guys. Because that's why you're here, right? The person who takes many biopharmaceutical meds has to recover twice. Once from the disease and once from the medications. Think about that. So my professional training in dentistry, about 50% of what I learned was wrong, and 50% of what I learned was right. My job is to figure out which half. Which half is wrong, which half is right. So I've spent my whole life trying to figure it out. I think I'm coming closer and closer, but it's a daily process. So, in fact, I'll give you an example. Leon Singer was a PhD when I went to the University of Minnesota Dental School, and he was an international biochemist. And we had this. We must have had 160 guys in our class, guys and girls. And he says to the class, he goes, "So I want you to know that micro and macronutrient deficiencies will never occur and never exist in America because we have vitamin-enriched bread like Wonder Bread." And I wrote it down. I mean, I actually wrote it down. And I'm like, okay, cool. Okay, so check that one out. No problem. I mean, this was back in 1980. And, I mean, we just believe what we're taught. And so, and then dentists are only taught ADA dogma in dental schools, which means that we're taught, so the fillings are okay, root canals are okay, dead teeth are okay, and it's stinking thinkable. It's just, Veronica knows, right? She's good. Okay. So there's only one disease. As I was attending a lecture out in Nevada, Frank Schellenberg is one of my mentors. He's a brilliant statistician. He's a brilliant physician. He's a brilliant integrative doctor. And he says in a big lecture, "I'm here to tell you that there's only one disease." And now there's a room full of about 300 people. And of course, everybody's looking around going, "You're kidding me," because we spent our whole life learning the reductionist approach that there's one disease, there's one symptom, there's one drug. There's the next disease, there's the next symptom, there's the next drug. And on it goes. That's the reductionist theory. So people are like, what is that? Any guesses?
Inflammation.
That's close. Aging. He said the disease is aging. What causes aging? The inability to make new cells and remove damaged cells. And I'm thinking, okay. So it's all about low voltage, low oxygenation, low electron donation, and low pH. Acidity. Yeah, go ahead. If you want to take photos of these, you can. That's no problem. There's my little dog we had to put down not too long ago. That was a sad day. So there's 3 signs. So anyway, this is what causes aging. This whole litany on the left. Cell receptor site insensitivity, insulin resistance, plastic cellular membranes, mitochondrial damage, decreased voltage in the cellular membrane, lowered oxygen, inflammation caused by lower metabolism. It all boils down to metabolism. It all boils down to ATP. And it really boils down to oxygen utilization. Okay? So you can be doing everything right. You can be doing everything, right. Taking all the right nutrients, getting enough sleep, getting all, not having stinking thinking. But if your voltage is low, and if your oxygenation is low, your metabolism is low, you're never going to make enough ATP in the cell mitochondrial membrane in order to function correctly. So that's that. So there's 3 signs of aging. Anybody know what those are? Okay, I'll give you, let me see if I get this. The first one is loss of memory. I can't remember the other two. So, what's really messing up your health? And the answer is low voltage. The biological terrain, aging, toxicity, standard American diet. And I would say to you people, follow the biblical dietary laws. You may not be Jewish, you may not think that you're, from the Christian perspective that doesn't apply. Yeah, I'm telling you, it does apply. So stay away from shellfish, stay away from pork. And if you've ever, you people all know who Jordan Rubin is and Josh X. Okay. Well, Jordan sent me this thing and he said, check this out. And it was a Instagram on, or a little text on pork, why we shouldn't eat pork. It was a little video clip. So if you haven't seen that, check that out. Just Google Jordan Rubin and then why you shouldn't eat pork. And you'll never touch pork again. It's basically a toxic, it's like a root canal. It's like eating a root canal too. It's a toxic waste. So anyway, so some of this, what's really messing up your health are some of the current medical myths, like cholesterol is at the scene of the crime of heart disease when it's not. Salt is bad for you, fluoride is bad for you, low-fat diets are bad for you, GMO foods and mercury is bad for you, right? No. So when I'm talking to people, there's up on the upper right-hand side, it says, Angela, my daughter's hospital bill. I'll hear all these horror stories about hospitals, and I'll come back and say, I have one to top your story. And that is, my daughter was born in 1986 in the Park Rapids Hospital, St. Joseph's Park Rapids Hospital. Everything went well. And about 2 months later, I got a bill for my daughter's circumcision. I kid you not, this is a true story. So I said, let me check, okay. And so I called the hospital. I said, I have a question. And I actually have a problem. I said, I'm questioning my bill for my daughter's circumcision. Can you help me out with this? Well, that must be a mistake. And I said, well, I certainly hope so, because I'm not paying it. So bottom line is, you got to be careful with, insurance. You know what standard of care means? The standard of care is what modern day medicine goes by. The standard of care is what insurance companies will pay with an attached code to it, so that you walk in. This is why appointments are 5 minutes in a doctor's office. They're listening for buzzwords. Like, you're depressed. Okay, so I can give you a drug for that. So we'll attach a code of depression, send it off to the insurance company, and that's how what I call Band-Aid or prescription pad medicine is run. And so we'll get into that a little bit later. But anyway, so I thought you'd probably be interested in that. So we could sum up the whole thing by this slide. In our intake forms we have a slide that says, or we have a form that says, are you tired all the time? And there's a checkbox. And are you tired most of the time? Are you tired all the time? Are you tired some of the time? 90% of the people, I don't know if you can verify this yet, but most people will put, I am fatigued all of the time, right? So why is that? You're fatigued because you are too toxic and you're too low on stomach acid. You have no glutathione. You don't have enough energy to move molecules across the cell membrane. That's low voltage. Your heavy metal toxicity is interfering with energy production and thyroid production. Your liver is full of plastic fat, so are your cell membranes. You are oxygen depleted because your pH and voltage are too low. When this happens, your mitochondria make 2 ATP versus 38 ATP molecules without the presence of oxygen. Your thyroid levels are low, you are dehydrated, and your mineral load is too low. You have dental infections along with galvanic problems, your adrenals are shot, you are low on iodine, you're not sleeping, your stress levels are too high, and your D-ribose levels are too low. So what do you do? You go back to that slide where it says identify the stressors, right? And you have to, I mean, this takes a lot of work. Anybody who thinks that staying healthy is twice a year going to your physician so he can run some labs where the levels are, or the ranges are so long and so large, that they'll say, well, if you're up here and you're normal, or if you're down here on this level, you're normal. What that really means is you're normally screwed up like everybody else in this country. And you're still pretty sick. At one of the AFRM conferences, again, there's about 2,000 to 3,000, I mean, these are huge conferences. And the physician says, the speaker says, so how many of you guys think you're healthy? About 90% of the hands go up. He starts laughing. He goes, you guys are crazy. Because you're all sicker than you know. You're so much sicker than you think you are. Because there's a health continuum that starts when you're in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s. And if you don't start testing and keeping up with your health, you're going to, by the time you're 60, 70, and 80, you're going to be a mess. So what to do? Pay attention to the biological terrain. Because the biological terrain is like your internal milieu. It's like your outdoor garden. and the biological terrain is very, very, there's a lot of moving parts. So what constitutes the biological terrain? So this is, now this is some of the things that Band-Aid prescription pad medicine doesn't measure. Am I in your way? Okay. So blood, saliva, pH, voltage, nutrients, oxygenation, acidity, alkalinity, these things can all be measured in different parts of your body. So when we say you need an alkaline state, it doesn't mean your whole body's alkaline. You know, your stomach has to be extremely acidic, otherwise you're going to be in big trouble. We'll get into that. Redox potential, that's electron donation, electrolytes, minerals, intracellular fluid, extracellular fluid. In between every cell in your body, there's this matrix called the extracellular matrix. That's where all the bugs and all the bad stuff and all the toxins hang out. So if you don't purge that extracellular matrix, that's with a lymphatic drain or lymphatic homeopathic remedies, you're going to be in trouble at some point in time. Because we're all toxic, let's face it. And any of us that are sitting in this room right now are toxic. So probiotics, lymph tissue. Do you notice what's missing? What's missing from the obvious thing that causes you and makes you sick? There's no bugs, there's no parasites, there's no bacteria, there's no viruses in this slide. That's because if your biological terrain is healthy, those things don't matter. Your body can take care of that. We all live with microbes, we know that, right? We live with tons of microbes. I know there's hundreds of trillions of cells. By the way, I'd like to know who counts these cells. You know, I mean, I've seen our bodies are composed of 30 trillion cells, 70 trillion cells, 100 trillion cells. Who's counting? How did they figure that out? I mean, I've always wondered. So anyway, that's just me. That's me. So anyway, the biological terrain, it's your internal garden. You're truly. So the questions that we ask as physicians is: are we truly getting people sick? Are we truly getting sick people well at the core, or are we just moving symptoms around? How do we really know? And we have to measure it. It isn't just from a blood test, because like I said, those ranges are so long, so large, they don't really tell you. So, okay, we talked about that. Okay, so what disrupts biological terrain? Mainly low voltage that leads to lowered oxygen metabolism and what I like to call the cellular terrorists. So what are some of the cellular terrorists? Some of the digestive destroyers are these right here. So azodicarbonamide, that's a hard one to say, is added to bread as dough conditioner, and I think Subway was a big defender of that. And they said they were going to take it out the last time I checked, they still have it in there. So, and all these other things. Stress causes poor breathing and lack of sleep. Stress is a killer. You can be doing everything right, 100%, and if you're stressed out, you're about 50% there. So think about that. Stress has a lot to do with it. Stress has a lot to do with breathing. You guys, you know about the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system? You all know about that? Okay. So the goal is to, we're all in sympathetic overdrive. That's your fight or flight sympathetic, that's your nervous system. It's, you're just like this all day long. Your parasympathetic nervous system is your rest, relax, sleep, eat, and digest. And so that's the one that you need to shift, and that has to do with a term called heart rate variability. And I'm thinking I have some slides on this coming up. Did you notice number 7 there? Nexium? Stay away from Nexium. Yeah, that causes hypochlorhydria in your stomach. So their answer, so Band-Aid prescription pad medicine's answer to regurgitation is what? To decrease the acid content. Well, what's wrong? The reason you're not digesting your food is because you don't have enough acid. So it's completely whack. Anyway, so immediate attention. The definition of a diet is a 3-week starvation crash course to allow you to fit into a swimsuit. And so, or you could be experiencing optical rectitis. This is a newer symptom of disease state. Anybody know what optical rectitis is? Some of your friends probably have. It's where your optic nerve gets tangled up with your rectal nerve and you have a crappy outlook on life. And then we have insulin signaling. And there's a new study from Adipose College which says women who are slightly overweight tend to outlive men who mention it. I love that. Okay, and then we have idiopathic nosocomial disease. Does anybody know what that is? Idiopathic means we don't know it's a hospital contracted nosocomial in the hospital. We have no idea what caused it. And if you don't get out of the hospital, you're going to die. Because they're going to kill you. And I know people that's happening. You guys have nurses, right? Oh.
I just said it's because the idiots gave it to you.
Yeah. So then we have Dunlop disease. Anybody familiar with Dunlop disease? This in general is the metabolic syndrome. It contains a whole lot of factors. But most doctors just treat varying factors in metabolic syndrome and don't treat the whole thing. So here's the key. On the right side, your genes are not your destiny. We know the genes don't change, but you can influence your genes by nutrigenomics and dietary endocrinology. What you eat and what you think affects your gene switching. Your dinner is more of your destiny than your gene performance. Interestingly enough. I find that kind of interesting. So Dunlop disease is where your belly Dunlops over your belt. And here's a good one. You cannot pharmacologically intoxicate someone into health. I love that. And what do we try to do in modern medicine? This job, my mother, I call it polypharmacy. I'm just writing a book, I'm finishing it up. It's called How to Get Off the Polypharmacy Dental Medical Merry-Go-Round. They had my mother on 3 blood pressure medications. And so I called the doctor and I said, and plus they had her on hydrochlorothiazide also, which also causes metabolic syndrome. I'm looking at you because you're the nurse. So I called the doctor, and she was very nice, and I was very cordial because I know I've talked to a lot of doctors and get met sometimes with resistance. And I always kind of like to find out what they know. And I always like to give them my background. And so I said, you realize that she's on 3 blood pressure medications. And she was on full strength of all 3 blood pressure medications, plus hydrochlorothiazide. And I said, maybe you could start removing those. And she was having all the symptoms. Like in that one slide it says, if your patient is in polypharmacy, get a PDR, look at the symptoms of the drugs, because that's probably what's really your symptoms. And you'd agree with that, right? I don't mean to be picking on you. So anyway, because their symptoms are most likely being caused by the drugs. So really, remember, it's lifestyle. So remember this, food is genetic and hormonal information. It's hormonal, it's medicinal, and it causes genetic transcription switches to be triggered on and off. You know about transcription switches? They're intracellular. They're things like, I think I have wait, let me go back. People ask me, well, what do you do? What is your diet like? And I'll say, I don't really, one nurse, a patient of ours, said a couple of weeks ago, she goes, you know what's interesting? She goes, we've spent our whole career, our whole medical training, learning that people are biologically different. We're all different. We're all individual. And then when we get out of school, we treat everybody the same. And I'm like, that's brilliant. I mean, it's stupid, but it's brilliant. And that's kind of what we do. So my theory on diets is that you want a high fiber, 90% plant-based diet, and that's forks over knives. It's basically, I'm a big believer in the ketogenic diet, and also the Mediterranean diet, because it has so many fruits and vegetables and oils. It has a lot to do with fatty acids and oils too. So this kind of a diet, if you've never seen the movie Forks Over Knives, you need to see it. It's really good. It's the old China stuff. You guys may be familiar with that. Or maybe not. Genomics testing. We use every cell in your body is designed to run on fatty acids, except the nerve cells and brain cells. They run on glucose. So you could really be devoid of glucose and function just fine. Your body has innate mechanisms that help protect us. One of them in the liver is called gluconeogenesis. That is, your body can take proteins and take fats, turn them into glucose because that's what your brain runs on. And it's kind of a protective mechanism. So we have genotype versus phenotype. Do genes really control everything? Well, in a way they do. They're the blueprint for everything to be controlled. But what really controls them are the dietary endocrinology and the nutrigenomics. What you eat is information. Don't ever forget that. Your food is information. It tells your genes, it tells your transcription switches what to do, what to make, what proteins, what RNA proteins to make. So and that's really good news, right? So we're not stuck. So here's some, we have, in our practice, we have a neurobiologic genetic SNPs test, which is really brilliant. This guy this is a neurobiologist who's taken the different, now, do you know what I mean when I say SNPs? Gene SNPs? Gene, okay. It means single nucleotide polymorphism. It means a reversal in the base pairing of the DNA. Okay, and it's like, so there's 4 basic proteins in the DNA molecule. And so, and they can be paired 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, 3, 1, but sometimes they get reversed. It'd be the difference of, like, if you go to the bottom, inflammatory systems, where it says cat versus cut. One letter is off, right? Well, cat is kind of different than a cut, right? Even though it's only one letter off. And 2 versus 2 is kind of sort of the same. Well, are you 2 going, or can we go 2? That's a lot closer than a cat versus cut. So this is what we're talking about when we mention gene SNPs. So here are some of the aging genes. Now these are the cytoplasmic transcription switches that we talked about. And there's one here in particular that I want you to be aware of, because if any of you are having trouble, or your parents or whomever are having trouble sleeping, there's a GAD SNP. That stands for glutamic acid dehydrogenase. It's actually decarboxylase. That's an error. Sorry, that's my fault. Which will not allow you to turn glutamic acid into GABA, which is a neurotransmitter. And GABA is gamma-aminobutyric acid. When I was going through the AFRM program, the neurobiologist, the neurologist said, here's a good way to remember these neurotransmitters. Your GABA transmitter is your James Taylor transmitter. It's kind of mellow and soft. And your glutamine, which is a neurotransmitter, is your Jimi Hendrix transmitter. And I said, that's pretty good. So I've never forgotten that. So anyway, this you say, well, why run a detox SNP, and why run these SNPs panels anyway? Because they yield you a lot of information, a lot of good information. So this particular panel that we use categorizes. There's 52 or 56 SNPs. It categorizes them into detoxification SNPs, digestive SNPs, methylation SNPs, immune SNPs, mitochondrial SNPs. So if you're energy deficient, it's probably predominantly a mitochondrial SNP. Neurotransmitter SNPs and inflammatory SNPs. Okay? So here are some of the cytoplasmic transcription switches. NAD+, nicotinamide, adenine, dinucleotide is what that is. Now these are chemicals and switches that will turn off genetic programming. And they're very effective. And you can damp them down, they can be on or they can be off. So this is how you slow down. The AMPK will get rid of your fat around the middle. SIRT1, SIRT2, NRF2 and NRF1 will increase and will bolster the antioxidant system. that's so important to fight free radical oxidative stress. And the biggest one here is, well, they're all good. The NF-kappa beta, number 5, it stands for nuclear factor kappa beta. That's your genetic inflammatory switch. If that switch is on, and there are many foods that will trigger that switch, if that switch is on, all of your inflammatory pathways get turned on, all of them. And there's a lot of them. So if you're arthritic and you're eating inflammatory food and you're flipping that NF-kB switch, you're in trouble. So there's 2 ways to turn the switches off. If I want to turn, and I used this example this morning, if I want to turn off all the light switches in a Marriott hotel, I'm guessing it would probably take me about a half a day. I could go around and turn off every light switch in the building. Or I could go to the breaker and hit the master switch and hit them all at once. That's what NF-kappa beta is. It's the breaker switch. So that's what shuts that down. So here's nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, and these are all available. But look at what it does. It helps with cognition and sleep function. It increases insulin sensitivity, improves cardiovascular health, it boosts DNA repair. How important is that? So, and then with exercise and CRs, anybody know what CR is? Stands for caloric restriction. In other words, eat less. Folks, I'm here to tell you that as we age, we need less food. And that's a good thing because it's a lot cheaper. But every time you eat, and eat a big dinner or eat anything, it causes a lot of free radical oxidative stress. Your body has to deal with the burn. And your kidneys in particular have to deal with the burn. So anyway, so with exercise and caloric reduction, NAD levels rise. And the new buzzword now in nutrition and diet is autophagy. Are you familiar with this? Intermittent fasting, you heard of this? So I go to the A4M conference about 7 months ago. I hadn't been there in a while. And it used to be all about bioidentical hormones, neurotransmitter testing, food, diet, but the whole thing seemed to be bent on autophagy. What are they talking about? Intermittent fasting, your body is so neatly put together that if you, well, let me put it this way. 90% of your energy, of your body's energy production goes to what? Digestion. So if you're eating all the time, all of your energy is going to digestion of food. Plus it's, and so you're on stress, you're overdrive, you're in sympathetic overdrive. You should never be eating when you're in sympathetic overdrive. Because why? Because you're not focused on digestion. So, but when you don't eat, your body's energy production can go to cleaning up the toxic load that your body has produced, or you produce by eating the junk and the crap that you shouldn't be eating in the first place. So that's kind of a big deal. But that's the new buzzword. So cellular terrace and cellular membranes. Remember, the cell membrane must have proper mineral content for active transport. Now, people say, you know, it's a good thing that we take our water and we filter it and clean it all up, etc., and we take everything out of it. But then, you know, you guys know from your car batteries, if you put distilled water in a car battery terminal, what happens? Nothing. It won't start, right? Because the water is there to hold a charge. And it's the same thing in your cellular membranes. So remember, the cell membrane must have proper mineral content for active transport. So without proper voltage, your cell membranes don't. I think I have some slides here. Yeah, here it is. The border patrol. So another thing I think the good Lord did that was miraculous is He made all cellular membranes bipolar lipid membranes. In other words, they're linear, but they're lines of fat. That your body, in order for, you remember back in high school biology when they taught you that the nucleus of the cell was the brain of the cell? Does anybody remember that? Maybe it is. Okay. Well, now the brain of the cell is now the cellular membrane. That's where all the action is. In particular, I want to focus on the mitochondrial membrane because that's where all the energy production is made. So, mitochondrial membrane is a bipolar lipid membrane. Membrane voltage has to be minus 20 to minus 25 millivolts. And so that's why you need to keep your alkalinity up. And alkalinity comes mostly from minerals. It's made up of cholesterol and has active and passive transport. So your body has, and this is another kind of cool thing, your body has these physiological barriers that if you violate them, you're going to be in trouble. And so, and there are more, but these are the top 7. The blood-brain barrier protects your brain from things crossing your brain. So, for example, magnesium doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier unless you take magnesium L-threonate, which does cross the blood-brain barrier. And your brain has a very protective mechanism to not let mercury cross the blood-brain barrier. Why? Because it will damage it. So then you have the GI mucosal and nasal barriers, and we've all heard leaky gut. That has to do with leaky gut. The endothelial barrier, which is your arterial barrier. The lung parenchymal barrier, which is your lungs. Gingival sulcus barrier, that's the dental one. That's the little, if you think about your gum tissue around your tooth, it's like a little turtleneck sweater. And we probe in the hygienist probe, we probe down 3 millimeters. If we go past 3 millimeters, we know there's a problem, especially if there's bleeding. We say, so now we violated that gingival sulcus. And what that means is the toxins can get through the gingival sulcus into the systemic system and start to go to the liver and produce C-reactive protein and ramp up inflammation. And then now your body is under inflammatory warfare, and your body says, hey, and it doesn't care much where it came from. It's just all the cytokines in your body are ramped up. That's what's called chronic inflammation. Cellular membrane, epidermal skin barrier, that's another barrier. So the fast track to aging. What contributes to cellular terrorism? All of this stuff. Sustained high blood sugar levels, processed sugar, telomere loss, gut dysfunction and oral dysfunction, genetic SNPs that have been improperly influenced, dental infections, mercury and water fluoridation, inflammatory diets, plastic dietary fats. Stay away from plastic fats, folks, because it's making the membranes plastic, and your body, and then they can't hold the charge. So then all the waste toxins end up in the adipose tissue, in the adipose cells, or in that extracellular membrane we talked about. But there they all are. So you notice on the bottom, low voltage and low oxygen, and again, notice what's missing. It's all the bugs. Because if this stuff is all not happening, or you're taking good care of this, the bugs aren't going to matter. Okay, so what about voltage? What about Bob? You ever seen the movie What About Bob? Nobody? I love that movie. It's crazy. Anyway, acidity versus alkalinity. Now, keep in mind, we say that we want our bodies to achieve an alkaline state, not everywhere in the body. Remember, a lower pH causes lower voltage, which leads to lowered oxygen content, which in turn yields less ATP production, and that's the big deal. That's why low voltage is such a big deal. So, again, what's the big deal concerning low voltage? Well, it affects all these systems. Factors involved in the human functional electrical system that maintain cellular voltage and are pH and are controlled by all these situations here. So, Jerry Tennant, who's kind of another mentor of mine, says if you're a physician, in order to get health right, you got to think more like an electrician than a physician, because it's all about voltage and repair. And so he wrote a book called Healing His Voltage. And he got very, very sick. He almost died. And he was a surgical ophthalmologist. And he set out on a mission to say, look, if I can heal one cell, I can heal them all. And so his mission, and it was a 7-year project. And he decided, and so he did all this study about thyroid hormone, humic and fulvic acid, dental infections, and how all this stuff affects your voltage. Amino acids, lipids and carbohydrates, stomach acid. When your stomach acid is not low enough, not acidic enough, your food just sits there and it rots, and it creates a leaky gut syndrome. And then that goes through the gut membrane, the barrier membrane that we talked about, right? And it causes what? Autoimmunity. Because things are floating around in the blood, and your body's saying, hey, you're not supposed to be here. So it attacks it. So, this stuff it's not as difficult as we think it is and as we make it out to be. It's just understanding the right precepts in order to put what's really happening in your body. And so I'm so glad that you guys are here taking the first step to say, hey, how does this all work? Because I believe you guys are the ones who have to take control of your own health. Are you all going to stay for Del Big Tree's talk? You need to. he's the most dynamic. He's one of the most dynamic speakers I know, and he's become a good friend. So anyway, vitamin C is necessary for absorption of iron. Oxygen is necessary to make ATP in the mitochondrial basement membrane. Here's your detoxification pathway. So there's a lot of information on these slides, and I never really intended to get through all of it. But here's the bottom line. The optimal diet contains 80% alkaline foods and 20% acidic foods. You need some acidic foods because you need to keep this redox potential going. There's an electron going in. You need to keep the pH at minus 20 millivolts and minus 25 millivolts. That's the barrier membrane, right? And that second line, right underneath the yellow acidic alkaline shift. And then see that 7.35 to 7.45? That's your blood pH. We all know that the pH of anything is 7 is neutral. If you go to 0, you're at plus 400 millivolts. This is how Jerry Tennant figured all this out. If you go to minus 400 millivolts on the right side, that's where you're extremely alkaline. And your blood, your body is innately homeostatically balanced to keep your blood at the pH between 7.35 and 7.45. Because if it gets out of that range, you die. And your body knows it. And so what it will do is it will begin to steal minerals out of the bone matrix, out of your teeth matrix, and it will dump them into the blood. And because it has to keep that blood in that very narrow pH range, or you're leaving the planet. It's that simple. So the body has a protective mechanism to prevent over-alkalization, and I just told you what that was. So your blood plasma has a preferred pH of 7.35 to 7.45 in the arteries. Have you ever heard that before? So your cell voltage is related to cell pH and cancer. And we just came off from a talk at the Truth About Cancer. And so we talked, I had 45 minutes there. But basically, here's your cell voltage. So you're growing new cells, and there's an inverse relationship. Minus, the higher minus you go, the more voltage status. So just look at the slide on the column on the right. You're making new cells at a pH of 7.88. And that's where you want to keep your oral pH also, because then you won't get oral cancer. And that's 50 millivolts. Those are the cell voltages in millivolts. Normal for kids. Why do kids heal so fast? Why do they, when they get hurt, they're up and they're healed. Because their millivoltage is, and their cell pH is 7.61. And you're making new cells at 7.88. And so normal for adults is 7.44, which is just above the blood pH. And so when you're tired, you're 7.26. When you're sick, you're 7.18. You change polarity, that's a whole big deal. I have a lecture on that. That's very complex. And at 6.48, cancer occurs at 30 plus millivolts. The voltage of plus 30. That's it in a nutshell. What increases voltage? Proper hydration, salt, minerals, and electrolytes. Electron donation, antioxidants, iodine. You've got to be taking iodine. If you're not taking iodine, get on a stick. You take 12.5 milligrams per day. Have it tested, but I'll guarantee you, every one of you in this room is iodine deficient. There's 3 leading gurus that talk about iodine. And one of them lives in North Carolina, one of them lives in Michigan, David Bronstein, and another guy, I'm not sure where he's in California. Guy Abraham, and they all say that we are completely and totally iodine and magnesium deficient. We're also deficient in vitamin D3, and you're not taking enough. I'm telling you, we just had a couple of great lectures yesterday about vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is not a vitamin, it's a hormone. It affects sleep. It affects all these cytoplasmic transcription switches. It is so much more important than you ever realize. And in fact, a friend of mine, who's a doctor, told me, she said, we're working on these things to increase oxygenation in the nasal cavity. And she called me up, she said, Tom, you know what, I just ran across this article. You know all about this gender confusion in the young kids? She said, there's a cause and effect link they're thinking now between lack of vitamin D3, lack of oxygenation in the brain, and probably there's lack of a few other things too. It's causing this gender confusion. And that makes sense. Because, why else would we be having all these issues? The world just seems like it's totally on its head. And I'm just like, I don't know, I'll stop right there. I know where I'm going with that. But anyway, so increase iodine, keep your cholesterol levels between 200 and 210. I mean, physicians are driving cholesterol levels down to 110. And they did that to my father. And I said, they're trying to kill you. So I said, get off of that, get on D-ribose, do this, 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 and this. And so we fixed it. Increasing oxygenation is the real answer, is the main thing. So what did our parents and our grandparents do differently than we do? Now I'm on the right. The same way, so how do we gain new electrons? That's how you raise voltage. The same way our grandparents did. They worked in the sun. Listen to this. See how difficult this is. They worked in the sun. They drank water from a well. They ate unprocessed foods. Duh. They were not afraid to touch the earth with their hands or their feet. I mean, are we not overly germ conscious? It's ridiculous. They hugged their families. They walked barefoot, especially along the ocean. And these people who walk along the ocean with their tennis shoes and they're jogging, I want to stop and say, take your shoes off. Because voltage flows from the salt water, which is highly charged, into your body, which is much lower charged. You have to run with attention. Because they don't understand this precept, this concept. They leaned up against trees, they walked barefoot, they stood in moving water while they were fishing, and they were not afraid to stand out in the rain. I mean, how wimpy have we become? So anyway, so enough of that. What about salt? Is salt bad for you? It depends. It depends on what kind of salt you use, right? Refined salt is not good for you because it drives up sodium levels. And then sodium levels drive water levels incorrectly, and it can cause high blood pressure. So, processed salt, sodium chloride on the right side, decreases voltage, increases blood pressure, increases AFib, increases fatigue. Contains sodium chloride, that's it. Refined salt, right here, let's try to get this one. Can you see that at all? It's hard to see that. Unrefined sea salt, and there's lots of different kinds. There's redwood sea salt, there's Celtic sea salt, there's probably not. But you know about this. But it increases voltage, it decreases blood pressure, decreases AFib, and it decreases fatigue, and it gives you a bunch of macro and micronutrients. So when you're drinking water, you've got to, and also, anybody you know, if yourself, if you're constipated, the way out of constipation is to put a bunch of minerals, especially magnesium, in the water. Just don't put far from the bathroom. But I'm telling you, it works great, and it'll increase your voltage, because it causes contracture of the muscles. The peristaltic action of the muscles that run to the gut. Okay, and it contains a bunch of needed minerals. Proper oxygenation, metabolism, breathing, and HRV are critical to your health. The area, the muscles, and the oxygen movement always. So dentistry has oral systemic links, and they're two-way streets. The hole can affect the mouth, and the mouth can affect the hole. And this, I told Felix, I ran into him in the hall, and I said, Felix, I said, I'm sorry I stole one of your slides, but I gave you credit for it. So this is his slide. And he's kind of a guru on health, oxygenation, and arch and space maintainers, etc. So this first top statement comes from Jerry Tennant. He says, a chronically ill patient needs a biological dentist more than they need a medical doctor. And I never would have believed that until I started looking at people that have all these symptoms and all these different problems going on in their mouth. Because your mouth can become septic. Great health requires a well-formed, disease-free mouth. End of story. Mouth breathers, about fifth one now. Mouth breathers lose too much CO2, carbon dioxide, because of shallow mouth breathing. So check your kids at night. If your kids or your grandkids are sleeping and they're breathing through their mouth, you have a problem. And then check their arch side. Check their bite. If their bite is like this, they got a problem. And check their tongue ties. Right? So, and we do this in our practice all the time. We're always looking for this thing. And I would say, I don't know if you agree with this, Veronica, but I think about 80 to 90% of all children have receded mandibles and have tongue ties and have constricted arch. Why is that? Diet. Largely diet. Because you all know about Weston Price and how he went around, I mean, back in the day it wasn't so. But in one generation, you can change people's facial form. Karl Marx understood that principle also. He understood that you can change a society in one generation. Here's how you do it. Through music and through controlling mass. So look where we are now. Grinding is a malocclusion. Thereby a magnesium deficiency. How about that? So check your magnesium levels. Okay. This is the key, down the bottom. We don't have enough time to go into this mechanism. It's quite complicated. But just understand this. When you're mouth breathing, you're losing too much CO2. Carbon dioxide acts as a buffer for the blood. pH, or what is supposed to buffer the pH, the blood pH, not your minerals. So if your breathing isn't right, your carbon dioxide, oxygen levels aren't right, then what's happening is your body is drawing minerals out of your bone and your teeth. And the same thing that's happening in your teeth is also happening in your skeletal matrix. Just never forget that. So that's why you need to keep an alkaline system. Okay. Now we'll get into this, and maybe I should have you come up here. So mouth breathing and proper arch development causes improper facial development, dolichocephalic, long face, of course walks into the bar with a long face, right? The mandible falls down backward, TMJ compression right here. As you get this concept in mind, as you wear your teeth down, this part of your jaw joint compresses. And so then we end up restoring bites. We end up putting the mandibles down the forward bit to open up the TMJ so we can recapture the disc. So the older people become, and the more, or if you're a grinder, you don't even have to be that old. When I first started out in Minnesota, I was in kind of a rural area, and I'd see these farmers come in, and they had no teeth. They were worn down to the gums. I'm like, now I'm upset. Nobody ever said anything about that in business. So you kind of wing it for a while until you figure it out. So airway constriction leads to obstructive sleep apnea, orthodontic problems, nasal, tonsillar, and adenoid. You must correct these early on. The best time to do it is when they're early, is when they're still growing. So I saw this as a bumper stick. Some mornings I wake up grumpy, and other mornings I let her sleep. So my wife says to me, she goes, you can't put that out the time. You upset the women. So she made me change it, and I didn't change it on this night. So I apologize. It's actually the guy who's still sleeping. So, but anyway, you got to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. We all know this. So your body can detox and heal and reprocess, and you can process long-term memory, release human growth hormone. But so many of us, this has become a huge, huge problem. The people aren't sleeping. And they're not sleeping. But we had a talk yesterday from a neurologist, and she had a whole new thing. It was really cool. She talked about vitamin D3 and how important that was in the brain cell. And this vitamin D3, because everybody's deficient. And because she had all these charts of all these places in the brain stem where vitamin D3 affected sleep centers. And it was fascinating. And because she was dealing with sleep apnea, and she was measuring oxygenation levels and finding out that oxygenation levels were okay. Well, how can that be? I mean, you're sleep apneic, and your oxygen levels are okay? And so she was just kind of flabbergasted by that. So she's been on a journey for how long? Years. That was fascinating. So anyway, and there's that glutamic acid decarboxylate. I got it spelled right there. Glutamic acid decarboxylate SNP. You cannot convert glutamic acid to GABA. And now a lot of these test kits that have come about, you can use these. You can do this stuff at home. You can test your hormones at home. You can test your neurotransmitters at home. You can do a cardiovascular panel and a metabolic panel at home, just with a blood spot and a salivary test. You can do a SNP test. So price, and they don't cost $10,000 or $7,000. They cost like $400, $350. And people say it's a lot of money. Well, it's a lot cheaper than going to a physician doing a huge panel that your insurance will pay for, but it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't yield anything meaningful. I mean, I can't get over these people. Well, I want to use my insurance. And to them I say, do you want to use your insurance or do you want to get well? It's up to you. Because if you use your insurance, you're not going to get well. It's going to take you forever and you're driving yourself nuts. And you're going to make insurance companies richer than you. Anyway, heart rate variability, breathing and malocclusion. The heart rate variability regulates the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, the ANS, controls it's divided into two. The sympathetic
Key
nervous
sensory areas of the body that
Sorry, I didn't realize what's going on.
It's all right. Ask them how we do it.
It's like a podcast.
Yeah. Oh, I know, cell phones. I'm really worried about this 5G stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I mean, the 4G is bad now. But we are so bombarded with this. It's frightening. We have a lot of people who can't. They walk into our office. We have to. You can't wear cologne. You can't wear perfume. Even essential oils bottles. And they're not crazy people. Like most physicians would think, get out of here. You're nuts. They can't fix you. But these people have real problems. And you guys may be one or two of them. Anyway, so the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight. The parasympathetic nervous system will allow you to climb Mount Everest without oxygen in the death zone. Hyperventilation syndrome decreases oxygen delivery to the vital organs due to low CO2. The key is if you are CO2 deficient, you cannot release oxygen into the cell. That's called the Bohr effect. And again, these are very complicated topics, but I just wanted to give you enough to kind of give you a new look at what's really making me sick. What's really going on here? Because the traditional stuff isn't working that much anymore. It's the guy pushing the lawnmower to jail. Did I tell you my favorite drug? They have a gut drug called Aciflex. I think that's an interesting name for a gut drug. I don't see that one anymore. It used to be out there a couple of years ago. I like to sit in one of those boardrooms where we're naming off these drugs. And how do you come up with this stuff? Jardiance, what does that mean? Okay, so remember, a low heart rate variability is related to what we call a bad bite or a malocclusion, and means that the CNS or the SNS, the sympathetic nervous system, is spiking. That means you're in sympathetic overload. So just think of this: if you're mouth breathing and you have a malocclusion, you can't keep your teeth together, your muscles are firing, your CO2 is deficient, you're not releasing oxygen into the cells, then you're a mess because you have low oxygenation and you can't produce enough ATP in the mitochondrial membrane. That's the bottom line. So heart rate variability is a very, very important thing, and most doctors don't measure it. It's just kind of new on the scene. It's kind of like autophagy. So I sat in the last A4M conference and I listened to this lady named Sarah Gottlieb, who was brilliant. And she said, and she gave a whole seminar on heart rate variability and how important it is. And she said this, and this hit me hard. What's most important is perceived stress. Your perceived stress is more important than the stress you're under. Because you're dealing with stress of financial stress or marriage, or kids, or whatever it is. But when you're still stressing over that, oh, I almost lost my job. I almost got hit by that car. Yeah, but that was yesterday. Get over it. I mean, you're continually driving down your heart rate variability, which is affecting a lot of things. Okay, so remember that. The perils of mouth breathing. We are designed to be nasal breathers. Mouth breathing causes tongue protrusion and narrow crowded dental arches, high vaulted palates. So look at your kids, and if any of you guys are practitioners and nurse practitioners, and you're looking at a patient, look at their butt, just ask them to close their teeth. If you can't see their bottom teeth, and if they're retruded like this way back here, they're having trouble with their teeth. And they need to have either an appliance or have some arch expansion. And the easiest time to fix it is when they're young. And we say between 5 and 12. That's the ideal time. Can we do it between 12 and 18? Yeah. Can we do it between 20 and 25? Yeah. It's a lot harder. It takes a lot longer. And now we're learning about new appliances that actually stimulate the periodontal ligament to grow new bone to advance your mandible. It's really cool stuff. I mean, we're in a day and age where it's exciting like it never has been to be a healthcare practitioner. So, here's another thing. An overheated pituitary or pineal gland can malfunction, and you can overheat if you're a nasal breather, or if you're not a nasal breather. Okay? So here's another field slide that I brought for you. Impaired mouth syndrome. So we look at her lip, look at her front teeth, look at the way she's sleeping, look at her face, it's drawn. It still is cephalic. And so if she's a mouth breather, she's not getting enough oxygen, she's going to probably fall asleep in school or at homeschool if you're homeschooling. And she's going to have all kinds of brain issues. So they're finding out that this is reducing the oxygen consumption in the brain, and that is a very, very big deal when you're still growing. There's so many things that go on. So we check arch width and arch length. No tongue ties. No, people can live with tongue ties, but if any of you women out there who are, have daughters or granddaughters that are nursing and they're having trouble latching, chances are there's a tongue tie. But just look at the mouth. It's real simple. I mean, it's not rocket science. So the airway must not be constricted or collapsed. And so benefits of nasal breathing. Look at them all. Increases oxygen levels. Increases nitric oxide levels. Hey, there's nitric oxide in the nasal mucosa, in the sphenoid sinuses. So that's not happening if you're not breathing through the nose. Reduces dry mouth, less decay, and helps expand the palate, decreases dental decay, decreases snoring, prevents overcrowding of teeth. Look at the tongue position, the tongue tie. Just have them lift their tongue up and see if they can have it open wide, lift their tongue up and see if they can reach their palate, right behind their teeth. If they can't do it, they're tongue tied. So it's real simple. Allows for ambient air to be warmed, allows for ambient air in the sinuses to be cooled. This cools up, this is a big deal, guys. This cools off the pineal and the pituitary gland. And you know what fluoride can do? Fluoride can calcify the pineal. So people will ask me, so should I do fluoride? Yeah, if you want hypothyroidism. If you want preeclampsia, and if you want to solidify your pineal gland and calcify, go ahead. Because there's really no benefit. So you have to have a water supply. Thank you very much. Okay, so mouth breathing associated with congested sinuses, causing a decreased nitric oxide output from these sinuses. Colds, hypoxia, phlegm, sinusitis, allergy, all this stuff is not so good. So here's a sleep apnea appliance that we make. So for those of you that know anybody, and maybe yourself or a husband or wife, that has sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, and there's a lot of people like this. Probably about 50% of people. We can make them a dental appliance that will position their jaw forward and keep the mouth open and increase their pharyngeal airway space. And so what we do is we use a polysomnogram, but it has to be done by an MD or a nurse practitioner under the auspices of an MD. And then you look at your hypopnea index. You guys know what I'm talking about? The polysomnogram is a test. The test for, and you can do this stuff now at home too. And then you look at your hypopnea index. If it's 15, if it's 0 to 15, you're kind of mild. If it's 15 to 30, you're kind of moderate. If it's over 30, and what that tells you is the number of times you stop breathing in 1 hour. So 0 to 15, if you need to stop breathing 15 times in 1 hour, you're mild. But when you stop breathing, it's a serious deal. You know who died from that? This guy was a great Christian guy. He was called Minister of Defense. Reggie White died of sleep apnea at the age of 46 years old. Anyway, so that's what they do. Bone remodeling orthodontics. This is early interceptive orthodontics. The treatment corrects phase 1. We divide it into phases. Because phase 1, they're still growing. We develop and widen the upper and the lower jaws or arches. Phase 2, we bring the teeth together in proper occlusion. That's the bite, and you get the bite right. And we begin at age 5 through 12, and this is the ideal time. Okay? So here's what a difference what it will make in the facial profile. We're actually widening the palate. And the cool thing is if you do it slow palatal expansion, it will become a permanent bone change. So then what will happen is the palate will drop, and the sinuses and the airways will increase. And the jaw will come forward, and the tongue will have room to
How long did it take to go from picture 1 to picture 2?
About 2 years.
2 years?
Two and a half years. So we say we're in phase 1 with a lot of children for, well, a good long while because their teeth are still coming in. And see, here's what happens to us routinely. Mom and dad will come in and we're super concerned because our kid has a ton of decay on their baby teeth. And we see this every day. And my doctor said that we need to put them out, we need to put them under general anesthesia, take all these teeth out, put in spacing teeth. I mean, permanent metal spacing teeth. And I said, so your child is 2 or 3, and you want to put them out under general anesthesia? Not if I'm on board, you know? And so we have a different approach. We say, well, listen, we look at their jaws, we look at their bite, we say, your child has a very constricted arch. How about if we just deal with the teeth that we have to deal with, and in a year, 2 or 3, or maybe right now, we put them into some orthopedic retainers, and that holds the space. Then we could take those teeth out, expand and widen their arch for them. And you don't have to spend all this money on all these cavities that he's going to lose in 3 to 5 years anyway. You can put them into the orthodontics and have a much better outcome. And I don't think we've ever had anybody that's ever said, well, that's a dumb idea. I mean, everybody kind of gets it because it makes sense. So here are your functional orthodontic conditions. Cross bites and off breathing, thumb sucking, overbite, deep bite, overjet, buck teeth, end-to-end bite, retreated chin, airway constrictions, crowding, jaw locking, headaches, restriction. So there's a whole bunch. So here's a proper orthodontic relationship. Overbite, overjet. And this is what we call blocked out cuspids. So if you see this in your family or your patients or your kids or your grandkids, I mean, it's pervasive. I mean, it's just out there. Check it out. Check them, but you got to go to the biology next. Here's what palatal expansion looks like, and I'll show you another piece. So this is a fixed appliance. We don't really do a lot of fixed appliances because we like to have the kids clean the appliances and check them out. We lose some, no doubt, but that's what it looks like. So this is a real case. This is an older case. But look at the difference. I mean, look at that. Now you have room for your tongue to go out there. You can leave the tongue out. And look at the arch form. And so that brings the jaw. Oftentimes you just straighten out the upper arch, and the jaw comes down and forward all by itself because it wants to be there. It's just a natural position. It's just a natural pain-free position to be there. So here's what they look like. And we do brackets. I've been trained orthodontics, so we do orthodontic brackets. And we do Invisalign, clear braces. There's a lot of orthodontic labs now make appliances, and we use a lot of them too. And we do a lot of orthodontics because the mouth has to be operating properly in order for you to get proper oxygenation. Why? Because you want to raise that voltage. You want to increase that metabolism. That's all about health. So it really does start in. So proper TMJ position, temporomandibular joint position. There's your ear. And so this guy named Gelb, he was an oral surgeon, and he figured out painstakingly what the proper position for the TMJ condyle was. And so he said, it's in this quadrant, 4 to 7. So we take panoramic films and we look for this, and we make squints. We try to get close to the Gelb 4-7 position. Why? Because it's a pain-free position. It provides enough space for the TMJ to function adequately. And notice it's kind of placed downward and forward. And it gives the lower face of it. You know, I mean, if you can do it with your children and say, okay, bring your teeth end to end and close your lips. And you can see it changes the facial profile. So, here's another thing. Get rid of your dental infections. Heavy metal toxicity destroys stomach, hydrochloric acid, and mitochondrial function, thereby destroying the cell membrane's ability to reach the -20 millivolt to -25. It shuts off the ATP production. So, how much time do we have? Does anybody know?
It's 2:52.
2:52, so we have like 8 minutes? Okay, so we'll run through this real quick. There's a couple things I wanted to show you. Okay, so this you might want to take a picture of. Here's your tip. This came from the One of the Holistic Dental Association, you don't remember, I was looking at. And this is pretty cool. So just get a picture of that and we'll spend, I don't have much time, so we'll kind of breeze through the rest of these. You know, there's never enough time. They give me half an hour, that's not enough. They give me 45 minutes of the truth about cancer, that's not enough. I almost got through. They give me an hour and a half here, it's still not enough. Because you always put in too many slides in your slide deck. That's because there's so much to talk about. So, and we're going to make these slides, and I don't know how exactly this is working, we're going to make these slides available on our website. So you can download the slide deck. Because I don't, you know, I'm long past the point where I'm worried about people stealing my stuff. If you want to steal it, it's fine, give it to somebody who use it, who needs it. So, and these are all the intraoral infections. And this is a cone beam. You've been probably hearing a lot about cone beam, 3D scans. This is a 3D scan. They're quite useful, but they have limitations. Don't talk to somebody out in the hall and say, oh yeah, they were saying that this office they went to, the only way to diagnose this is with a CBT scan. And I'm saying we pre-screen with panoramic film. We have one that's upgraded to a CT scan. And we have a CT scan at our implant guy's office. And so we pre-screen. I mean, they're very useful. They're very, very useful, but they're limited and you have to be highly trained. So when I'm looking at and diagnosing things, here's what I'm asking myself. Is it sinus? Is it jawbone? Is it jaw or is it bone or is it the same thing? Is it nerve? Is it muscle? Is it the gums? Is it gingivitis? Is it teeth or is it hair? And then I'm looking at, is it joint related? Is it meridian related? Is it sleep related? Is it bruxism? Is it infection? Is it periodontal or is it glandular? So that's kind of what sort of goes through my head when I'm trying to do the diagnosis. So what I've learned, and maybe I'll just leave it with this, what I've learned in my years of doing this is if I shut up and listen to you guys tell me what's wrong, and all I have to do is just shut up, and you guys will usually leave me right to the diagnosis. Or I'll have a much better idea of what you're talking about. And I'll be in a much better position to help you. Versus the, okay, I'm the doctor, okay, so I'm listening to buzzwords and I'm going to get you. So that's not how it works in our office. It never really has. But we really believe in what we're doing. And we think it's really important. And we think that, I also think that holistic and functional, and whatever you want to call it, functional medicine, integrative medicine, complementary medicine, what really kind of ticks me off is that we call this alternative medicine. This, folks, is not, this is anything but alternative. What I say is what they're doing is alternative. What we're doing is physiological and biological, and that's that. That's the end of that story. So here's the chart. There's a couple of charts out there. There's a couple of charts. Don Ewing came up with a great chart. It's $25. But I finally got it. I bought 3 or 4 of them for a practice. So meridians are bioenergetic channels made up of connective tissue. They're just connective tissue channels. And they are what transmit the voltage. And your teeth are like little batteries. So when a tooth becomes infected, the organ system becomes infected. We had a guy here yesterday, he was a patient of mine, who flew in from Virginia, type 1 or 7. I said, can you help this guy? And I said, I looked at him and looked at his mouth and I said, so are you having any urinary, bladder, troubles? He goes, well, I have prostate cancer. I go, well, there you go. So he had huge infections. So I sent him to the surgeon, we got all removed, ozonated it, and he's feeling a whole lot better than when we tackled his prostatic cancer. Prostate cancer is one of those, it's not that, depending on what type. If you catch it early, it's pretty easy. I know, because my grandfather died of prostate cancer. So I'm well aware of that connection. So there are 40,000 root canals each day that are loaded with toxic bacteria spilling into the systemic circulation. PDL becomes encapsulated by the body as it walls off the bacteria. The body tries actively to wall off a systemic or a localized infection, but it can only do it for so long. And think about it. Every time you push down on a tooth has a periodontal ligament. It's like a little sling. The teeth are mobile. And every time you push down on that infected area, it squirts a little toxin residue into the systemic circulation, which goes right to the liver, increases C-reactive protein, and causes inflammation. Every time. And that's my spiel when people say, well, should I go look at it? I said, well, if I were you, I wouldn't. I mean, they're septic tanks. And then same with osteocavitations. These are areas of dead bone. At least, what's baffling about this is everybody knows they're out there. It's estimated that at least 20% of all hip fractures replacements in the USA are due to osteonecrosis. But yet somehow dentists don't believe it. I mean, I don't know. But they also don't believe it might be bad. They say that it doesn't outcast. Well, I'm here to tell you, they are wrong. They are dead wrong. And here's the proof.
Go back. What's that?
Let's go back. So let me cruise through here, because we got to wrap this up. That one's worth. Jesus. It's much clearer on this. You know. So everything else. Okay. Like I said, we'll have all of these. Okay, here's a good one. Which cancer nutrients do I recommend? There's a lot more, but this is what I'd start with. Nutrition and dental decay. We started a new little company called Pro Oral Health, and that's just another cheap shot of me trying to get my granddaughter. It's a sign of mineral deficiency. Improper diet and lack of essential fats. Improper acidity, unbalanced microbiome, mouth breathing, constricted air. That's what causes nutrition and dental decay. And we've been beating people over the head for years with flossing and brushing, and we haven't made a lot of progress, right? So there's more to it. Oral microbiome. Two probiotics you need in the mouth. One's called Streptococcus salivarius K12. It decreases upper respiratory infections and strep pyogenes. Streptococcus salivarius M18. It sounds like a little bit like a Honduran hip game. But it decreases strep mutans and dental caries. So we're coming out with this product pretty soon. How you doing? Welcome. What's happening on the hall?
Bedlam.
Oh, we'll
They
stand
know
here.
they're calming down.
Okay. So here's something that we have the U.S. rights for the silicon on the right. This is a mineral drop, orthosilicic acid. It's silica. It's highly absorbable. It increases bone density, enamel density, and collagen. So it's good for skin, hair, nails, and nails. There's the dental fluid transport system. There's a little microhighway system in there too. The two people, Steinemann and Lenora, spent their entire lives writing on this dental fluid transport system. It's about this thing. This patient hands it to me and says, "Tom, I'd like to give you this book." And so I read through it, and at the end it said they had all this proof about this dental fluid transport system. And they brought it to a couple of universities, and the university looked at it and go, "No, we don't think so. We don't think this has anything to do with it." Okay.
They're blind.
Thank you. Oral galvanism. I told the story this morning. I had a patient who he had one crown. He had one metallic-based crown called porcelain fused crown, and we took it out because he wanted to get all the metal out. I took the crown out. About 10 seconds later, he goes, "Oh my God!" And I'm like, "Alan, what's wrong? What happened?" He goes, "Well, I never told you this, but the ringing in my ears just stopped." And I go, "What ringing?" He says, "Well, I never told you that." I said, "Well, how long has this been going on for?" He says, "About 10 years." I go, 10 years? And so we did the crown, we did the prep, and we came back 2 weeks. How's the ringing? It's gone. So, I mean, it's not always that dramatic, but it can. And for him, it was. So anyway, let me see if there's building the bone. Ozone therapies, we do a lot of ozone therapies. Ozone fixes everything, you guys. It fixes all this stuff. Increasing nitric oxide is a huge deal. So, okay, this one I want you to film. We're not done taking pictures. This is huge. Iodine deficiency, iodine, selenium. I'll end with this. There are 3 nutrients that if Life Extension did a very, very lengthy, extensive study on this, there are 3 nutrients that if you are deficient in, all 3 at the same time, the rise in all-cause cancers rises precipitously. All-cause cancers rise precipitously with these 3 nutrients, and they are iodine, selenium, and vitamin D3. So the next one's probably vitamin D3. No, magnesium. That's a good one. Okay, going on to N-acetylcysteine. This stuff works better than Tamiflu. This is like Tamiflu. So if you have shingles, or you've got the flu, or you've got any number of viral type diseases, this stuff works great. This is a sulfur-based component. It's the key forerunner for glutathione production. It's a great nutrient. Now, a friend of mine who's a doctor sent me a page. Tom, check this out. This stuff is amazing. So forget Tamiflu. Use N-acetylcysteine. Your glutathione production will rise precipitously. Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much. All right, so let's go listen to Del Bigtree. He's the man.